By the early 2000s, investigators had received over 3,000 leads, and advances in technology made them hopeful. They entered the DNA from the crime scene into the recently established CODIS system, a national DNA database that includes profiles of convicted offenders.
The strategy was to continually try to see if there would ever be a match while also investigating leads.
But over time, there appeared to be no match.
For us to have DNA evidence from the suspect but not have that linked to anybody, it just didn't make sense. It seemed hard to believe that the suspect hadn't committed any other prior crimes where his DNA wouldn't be in the system.
That's when he says detectives realized they had to go in a different direction.
My name's Colleen Fitzpatrick, and I'm one of the pioneers of forensic genetic genealogy.
In 2011, investigators reached out to Fitzpatrick to inquire about using forensic genetic genealogy, the practice of using software to compare unknown DNA profiles to information from public DNA databases and searching family trees to identify suspects. Genetic genealogy is well known now and has been used to solve numerous cold cases, but at that time, it was in its infancy.
When I started in this field, it didn't exist.
Fitzpatrick says most police agencies had been skeptical of this new investigative tool.
The police thought I was crazy, you know, this little old lady with a crazy idea, and I was actually almost laughed out the room.
But the King County Sheriff's Office took a chance on Fitzpatrick.
It was for free. I just wanted to see if it worked. What are you going to lose if you try something?
The Yarboroughs were encouraged.
I think it wasn't until we met Colleen Fitzpatrick that I really began to think, oh, you know, they're going to find this person.
And it didn't take long before Fitzpatrick came up with the name of a possible suspect that surprised just about everyone.
Everyone went, no way.
From the beginning, it was very promising. And the story took some really bizarre twists.
In 2011, 20 years after Sarah's murder, when forensic genetic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick started working the Yarborough case, she traced Sarah's killer's family tree back to a man named Robert Fuller, whose family had come to America on the Mayflower.
I found numerous matches to the name Fuller.
When Fitzpatrick gave the name Fuller to the King County Sheriff's Office, they immediately knew of one person with that last name. Bill Fuller, the Yarborough's close family friend, who helped get that memorial bench built for Sarah.
Naturally, that piqued our interest.
From the beginning, Sarah's family and friends believed Bill Fuller had nothing to do with Sarah's murder.
He didn't look at all like the suspect. The wrong hair color, he's short, he's not tall. He just didn't fit the profile at all.
Fuller's age didn't match the profile either. He's 79 years old now, but was 48 years old at the time of Sarah's murder, at least 2 decades older than the man Drew Miller described.
There was no way that I could be even remotely connected to the case.
He fully cooperated with police and voluntarily gave them a DNA sample. It didn't match the DNA found at Sarah's crime scene. Yet Fitzpatrick remained optimistic.
The good news is that we came up with a possible last name to investigate, and this was the first break in the case in 20 years.
Fitzpatrick knew that Sarah's killer was in the Fuller family tree somewhere, so she and her team went back to work. And as the years went by, she knew she was only getting closer, especially after 2018, when forensic genetic genealogy was used to identify the Golden State Killer.
Golden State Killer really started the big revolution. Things had evolved that we had the data to work with. The technology was in place that we could go for it.
Then in September of 2019, Fitzpatrick's team made a breakthrough. They came up with two new possible suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who, as the DNA showed, were distant cousins of Bill Fuller.
You know, this is 8 years of on and off and looking at it, never giving up. This is it. This is exciting.
Edward Nicholas was a registered sex offender. His DNA was in the system, it was in CODIS.
But Edward's DNA wasn't a match, so they zeroed in on his brother Patrick, who in 2019 was a divorced loner who lived a couple of towns away from Federal Way.
We learned that he was working at a auto parts store, lived alone, no children, no friends or acquaintances that would even visit him. Everything that he did was mostly by bus. He wasn't driving.
Detective Free says he discovered that when Sarah was murdered, the bus route Nicholas often took happened to go past Federal Way High School. Back then, Nicholas was just 27 years old, and around that time looked very much like the description of the sketch.
It looked promising at that point, but we still needed to get a DNA sample from him to match up to the DNA evidence that we had.
So in late September 2019, investigators came up with a plan.
We assigned a team of undercover detectives to start doing surveillance on Patrick Nicholas in the hopes of obtaining a surreptitious DNA sample.
Eventually, undercover detectives followed Nicholas to a laundromat.
They saw him go outside and smoke a cigarette, and Patrick Nicholas was seen throwing the cigarette butt on the ground. That was collected by our detectives.
That's what you needed.
Yes.
Right there, that cigarette butt.
Yes. Actually, he dropped 2 cigarette butts and a napkin that fell out of his pocket, and all 3 items were collected.
The DNA samples were rushed to the crime lab, and within days, detectives received the call they had been waiting for.
The DNA matched. This was our suspect.
Perfect match.
Yes.
Patrick Nicholas was arrested.
There were so many suspects over the years. Was Patrick Leon Nicholas ever named as a suspect?
Out of 4,000 tips, he was never named.
I was pretty in shock.
The news was a relief for Sarah's family and friends, who had never given up hope that they would get answers.
One thing the detectives kept telling us was, eventually technology is going to solve this case. I trusted that, and they turned out that they were right.
And I remember going out to my car and bawling, just bawling. Finally, they got him.
When Drew Miller, who had seen Sarah's killer back in 1991, saw Patrick Nicholas's face, he says he knew they had the right person.
What did he look like?
The same guy, just older. Just the same evil
face.
eyes. Those evil eyes stayed the same.
All these years later.
Yeah.
But it was not over yet.
Why do you think you're here? I have no clue.
During his interrogation,
Who are you in charge for?
when detectives specifically asked him about Sarah's murder, he gave an alarming response.
What we're investigating is the death of a young girl. Her name is Sarah Yarborough.
Interestingly, he asked what year this was, and that really sent up a flag.
Why?
Why would you ask that? He's being told this is a murder case. We're wondering at this point, are there other victims?
This is it. I'm not going to say anything.
After 1.5 hours, Nicholas asked for an attorney and stopped talking. But his criminal record would speak volumes.
I am the one that got away.